Last year we planted these green giant Arborvitae, which they looked beautiful last year. Nice and green and healthy. The foliage was even greener than this, but we failed to do one thing. And it's kind of a pain. This is about 400 feet away from any available water by a water hose. So you would actually have to bring water to this tree and water it. One thing that evergreens do not like is dry falls and dry winters, especially with high winds. They will completely desiccate and dry out this plant. For example, this plant has not been watered, so it's already drying out. You can see this Leyland cypress should be nice and straight, but it's already drying out. The root ball is extremely dry. In most cases, plants that are grown for the consumer are in a very lightweight mix. So the trucking costs, or the trucks, are not overweight when filled with potted plants. So this plant has a lot of bark, has a little bit of peat moss, very dry, doesn't hold a lot of water. So when you plant this in the ground and you don't water it, by the end of the winter, you might end up with something like this. And looking at this, you could tell this is dead. It snaps, and you could hear it snap, and the foliage just comes off. One thing about evergreens, different than other plants that lose leaves, an evergreen may keep its nice green foliage for 3 months after the damage is done. So this plant 6 to 3 months ago may have completely dried out, but it still looks nice and green. All of a sudden, when warm weather comes, it turns brown like this. So it is important that, and even this, you would want to water this plant too. Now, if I watered this plant with about 2 or 3 inches of water, or 3 gallons, it's going to stand straight up in about an hour. So very important. So during the winter months, when it's so dry, it's going to blow over. So during the winter months, you're going to come in and you're going to irrigate the root ball, a little bit of mulch. Only 2 or 3 inches of mulch should be put down. You don't want what I call volcano mulching, where people mulch this high. That is very detrimental to certain evergreens like Leyland cypress. I live in between Waynesboro and Stanton in the Shenandoah Valley. My name is Mark Viette. Join me next time in the garden. How do you plant a shrub or a tree in the garden? And what we're doing here is to create a screen where some of these mature trees had been removed. We're planting Leyland cypress. Now, Leyland cypress does get big. Keep that in mind. It'll get 50 feet tall, get 25 feet wide. It'll grow as much as 3 feet every year, where these other evergreens had died, planted in the fall. They got dry during the winter, and they're going to be replaced. So what you want to do is prepare. Now, this is important for Leyland cypress. Leyland cypress have what is called a root collar. And right at the surface where this plant is planted, there are roots that grow out. And you can loosen a little bit of the soil here. Now, if you're really root bound, you might want to get a tool, something like this, and just loosen the edge. See, there's a root right here growing, and if the plant thinks it's in a pot, it will continue to grow, and eventually the roots may not grow out and it'll strangle the plant. So you want to loosen it like that. So with Leylands, since they have a root collar, you do not want to really prepare the soil too deep because they're going to sink over time. And one thing about Leylands, they've done a lot of research. If this sinks 2 or 3 inches, and then you have bark on top of the 2 or 3 inches, you definitely could have plant problems 10 years down the road. So I'm dug a hole here a little wider. If you see any roots, cut them. And so you're going to take the soil. Well, before that, I've already dug part of the hole. What I'm going to do is take a mix of peat, perlite, mycorrhiza, which is fungi, and I am putting that right here. And then what I'm going to do is take the soil and add to it. Again, I'm not going too deep, a little wider. And then, to make it work well, I will take this, and it's almost like I make a mountain or a volcano. And the soil, as it rolls down the makeshift mountain I'm making here, mixes on its own. It's like lava flowing down. So it mixes. And if I need a little more, and you can use compost, you can use other products that are recommended for soil. And so I'm just going to go through, and it's mixing on its own. I'll do this 1 to 2 times depending on the type of soil you have. At the same time, if you have an organic fertilizer, you can add this. Usually I use what is known as a starter fertilizer, a fertilizer for new plantings. Then I'm going to take some of this soil and put it in the bottom of the hole. Again, loosen these roots around the base. Then I'm going to set the tree. I see I need a little more. If you're planting things like dogwoods, there's a phrase you have to remember. Plant them high, never die. So, you know, with certain plants, even dogwoods, I might have them come up a little bit because they tend to sink and they get waterlogged. So sometimes that term, plant them high, never die, really works for planting. So I'm going to take this and fill in. Now, if you have really rocky soil, it can take a while. And sometimes I have soil with lots of roots. But I'm just going in like this. And then there's room to mulch it. Only 2 to 3 inches of mulch. Now the important thing is that you must keep it watered. What we find is the soil is comprised of, that the plant is in, has a lot of bark, and a lot of peat moss, no clay. So if you have high winds, it will dry out this plant, especially during the fall and winter months. So you're going to take your water. If you don't have a garden hose, you don't want to do it too quickly, but I'm going to put maybe half this container. I'll work on planting another plant, and then I'll continue to put water so it's thoroughly soaked. I live in the Shenandoah Valley, in between Stanton and Waynesboro. My name is Mark Viette. Join me next time in the garden.